Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of Imperial as One's Belonging series, where we explore the lived experiences of individuals from the Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. And each week I tell you about the special guests that we're going to have. And as you can see, we've had quite a number of special guests. But today I got my uncle with me, right? So I call him Uncle Paul, although his name is George Brown. And it really is a privilege and a pleasure for him to share his story with us today. So I'm still going to call you Uncle Paul. Uncle Paul,
okay.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna start off by asking my usual question, which is, can you tell us a little bit about what it is or what it was that helped you to gain your sense of identity, your sense of belonging, as you were growing up?
Yes, I grew up in a household along with other cousins, older cousins.
Mm-hmm.
With that, I must admit, they acted as role models for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really knew who I was from an early age because I saw them, the way what they did, the way they worked, the studying, when they were studying. They weren't all the same individuals all the time. However, I always had my family there, additional family members. And so I had no problem with the identity. And at school, I think that they the emphasis was on development of the individual as well. As
right. So how do you mean development of the individual?
Pardon?
How do you mean when you say development of the individual? In what sense were they trying to help you?
Well, it's like to get you to know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And they had, they sort of worked along with certain principles, guidelines, and you being in the school had to abide or go along with these. So I think that was where my characteristics or my character developed. With
So was just for a backstory, this was in the Caribbean.
This was in the Caribbean, yes. This is the early 60s.
Yeah.
I talk about secondary school now. The school I attended, it's a very old school. It's the oldest in the Caribbean, and I think it's over 290 years old.
Yeah.
And they had standards. I mean, at the time when I went to school, I think they still do. We didn't say teachers, it was a master or the mistress, So it was an old-fashioned school. I almost said use the word classical school.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that was in Kingston,
in Kingston, Jamaica.
Kingston. Yeah. And it was like when you say that it had the standards, it was from like a colonial past and the development of almost like a grammar school system or something like that.
It was a grammar school. It was a grammar school, and pardon me, and it catered for a wide range of people because when I attended school, while I was there, it wasn't just Black people.
Okay.
The full range, because at the time the British Army were in Jamaica, and quite a lot of the children of the soldiers attended that school. But for admittance, you have to pass the 11 plus examination. And so, so we had a very wide selection of students. We had a very wide selection of, pardon me, I've got a bit of a problem with my throat. Yeah, we had a wide selection of individuals from the community. And because from our school came people like Edward Seaga, Prime Minister of Jamaica, Harry Belafonte. When in my time, D.K. Duncan, who was one of the ministers in the government in Jamaica, Maurice Foster, cricketer,
Yeah.
The Dojans who were
Yeah.
cricketers, and so it had a history, and the school wanted to adhere to a certain level.
They were setting this.
They were setting the
Setting the standard. Yeah.
yes,
So
yes.
how did you feel about being at a school where the standard was being set? How and what did that make you feel going for as a young man?
Well, it didn't make me feel any different. I just went along with it
Okay.
because it is something. It wasn't something strange because at the time in the Caribbean, every family set the standards were fairly high,
Right.
and so I didn't feel any out of place. Sometimes it was a bit. What should I say? It was sometimes not never out of my real comfort zone, but when you had people who were very important people who sent their children to school, to that school, there was within the children, the students themselves, we sort of balanced out each other.
Okay.
If you understand what I'm saying, if you understand. And I think we learn from each other, and you know, yeah, we basically learn from each other.
Okay. Do you was because you're saying about there were so many people there who came from in this
Wealthy background.
wealthy backgrounds,
Yeah.
privilege, yeah,
Privileged backgrounds, yes.
privileged backgrounds. What was that lauded over you, or was it? You said that it leveled out. How can you give any examples of how you guys leveled it out in that sense?
Do you know, I have never thought of it being anybody being different.
Okay,
Nobody sort of lorded it over anyone. And I must admit, I remember Latin. I had a Latin textbook, and I couldn't find my Latin textbook. And eventually I saw someone with it, and it was somebody who I would imagine whose parents had more money than mine,
right,
business owners. But he
yeah,
took my Latin book because he probably couldn't get his own. I don't know why, or he lost his too many times, but he took mine. You see, but I've never been felt as if anybody was trying to lord it over us
right,
or me at any time. We all just gelled together.
mm-hmm.
Well, not all, you chose your friends in a class,
Yeah,
each class we stuck together, but
mm-hmm.
nothing, but yes, there were a number of very children of very important people there. And
Mm-hmm. So,
no
so, so,
problem.
so in terms of kind of like uh, you're an engineer. What was it that kind of like inspired you to kind of like pursue engineering? What pressures did you have from your parents, from your family? Did they have any aspirations as to what they wanted you to do? And what was it that helped you to make your decision?
Well, I'll start with the last bit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. No, I'll go. My parents didn't put any pressure on me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think my dad understood exactly what I wanted to do. Neither
Okay.
did I. Neither did I.
Mm-hmm.
However, we had a cousin who was at the time staying with us, and he was doing engineering. And I really was impressed with the work he was doing, the drawings. And I used to sit across the table from him, watching doing his maths, doing his engineering drawings. And I thought, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And something that really stood out, and I forgot all about this. When I was in Jamaica, they were building the causeway from Kingston through to Portmore.
Yeah.
They were beginning that causeway, and there was a bridge over that part of the sea. And I went there, and I was fascinated that it was standing in the sea. And I'm just wondering, how did they do that? And then, that's what has triggered my interest. And from then on, I decided engineering.
Engineering. So what was your route into engineering? How did you get into, when was it that when was it that you came from Jamaica to the UK, and was that to pursue your engineering? How does the story unfold?
Okay. No, I wasn't a very diligent student. And my dad decided, hey, something had to be done. And somehow I decided, I don't remember how I got to the technical school, Kingston Technical, and I was there part-time because I was 16 I was about 16. No, I wasn't quite 16. But I went to Kingston Technical College, and all of a sudden, everything was more practical. We did engineering drawings, maths, the physics, the chemistry, everything just sort of came, I blossomed in it all. And then he had decided we were coming to the UK, Manchester, in fact. And in 1965, at the age of 17, I landed in Manchester.
Wow.
Now, pardon me, it was a bit of an experience. However, coming from Jamaica and everything is all new, but then although it was new, the environment and the same story I hear people repeating is that they get on the train and they see smoke coming from all these chimneys, and they're thinking, oh, the English are rich because everybody has a factory. There's a factory everywhere, because all the smoke. Only to learn they were people's homes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, getting into engineering, I just thought I wanted to do engineering, and I saw a vacancy for an apprentice, and I said, yeah, I'm going to go for it. And I couldn't go with my dad, but a family friend took me went along with me to the interview, and I got accepted. Now, what he did say was that we're taking a chance in taking you on, because you'd be the first Black person we've ever employed.
So this was the recruiter, the interviewer.
Recruited, yeah, the HR personnel. He said they've never taken on any Black persons before, any Black individuals, and I would be the first. And I was 17, and normally they take apprentices on at 16.
Yeah.
He said, however, I'm going to give you a chance. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't go by this actual apprenticeship route. I went in. The apprentices, what they did, just moved around to different departments and different, gaining different skills. It wasn't really a practical, they were on the tools in actual fact. Yeah. But although I wasn't an apprentice, I was moved around a bit. And then, to be honest with you, I took a lot of things into my own hands. Yeah. Because, and it's something I always believe in, that you need to control your destiny to a certain extent, as much as you can. So wherever there are opportunities, I believe if you can't go through it or under it or through it, you go to the right, left, under, or over. Yeah. But you always need to achieve your goal. So it's not something that ever kept me back. Mm-hmm. And I took that into my own hands and moved around the places I liked. However, there's one little problem that we all had to take a test. Mm-hmm. I took the test and I got the highest mark. But what they said to me, you're 17 and everyone else is 16. So, of course, they weren't just dead on 16, but you're the oldest one. So when they interviewed them for college, those who were 16 who passed the exams, well, there were three sort of categories: the craft, the technician, and the technologist. And those who didn't do well in the exam were sent on the craft course, the more practical course. Those who did fairly well went on the technician's course, and those who passed well went on the technological course, which was what they called the G-Star. And that G-Star took in 2 years of studying, 6 months, and then they went on to the higher national certificate. Me being put on the technician's course had to go through 4 years and then a conversion course. So I had to catch up with, I had to play catch up then.
Yeah.
because they were way ahead.
Yeah.
And that's,
Even though
you know,
even though you got the highest score,
yes,
so you scored higher than everybody else, but they put you on the middle band,
the
not on the
technician
top band.
group.
So they put
Yes,
you in the technician band, not the technologist band.
yes. You see, additionally, when I went to the college, I don't know if it was the college who did it or the company, but when I went to the college to register, and I gave them the marks. The only thing I remember, I had 73% in chemistry. That's the only thing mark I remember when I
Yeah.
passed everything. And he said, "Oh, I don't think the standard of education in Jamaica is as high as the UK's." That's what that was said. So I went into the technician's course. And not knowing much about engineering and the different courses or different routes is something I just accepted.
Right. So it meant that you had to spend an additional 2 to 3 years to
Probably
get
even
through.
more. I was going to say
Okay.
4 years because I had to do T1, 2, 3, 4, and then the conversion course, which is 5. And then I would go into the HNC first year. And those who did the G Star 6 months, and they went into the ONC, and then the ONC 2 years, HNC 2 years. So when I finished my T4, they would have been in H1. So
Right.
it's 3 years.
Right. So it set you back 3 years effectively. Yeah.
Effectively.
How did you think about it at the time? Did you think about it at the time that maybe you were being disadvantaged? And what kept you motivated to say, you know what, I know you said earlier on, it's kind of like you want to keep going. You had your goal. Was it that intention that kept you going?
Yes. And not only that, examples, because I had my cousins and they were doing well, they were doing whatever they were doing. And, I didn't want to be the one who wasn't achieving anything.
Yeah.
So that was my motivation.
Yeah.
And I tend to be the sort of person who does a lot of planning.
Right.
So I say, in 5 years, I want to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually put a route to where I'm going to be, I want to be. And, you've got to, sort of add in for failures or unfortunate issues, unfortunate things
Yeah.
happening. So, but I like planning.
The reason why I'm smiling is because the way you're describing it, it speaks of an engineer. I have to plan out the route where I'm going. I need to know all, so it's kind of like a perfect match that
Yeah,
actually, despite anything, you knew where you were going to go. It was just a matter of how long is it going to take me. However long it takes me, I'm still going to get to my end destination.
yeah, and the routes, because I wanted to end up in the design office.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to get to the design office, you need experience in actual, the manufacture of items
Mm-hmm.
or processes,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to design things and, components, a whole product or whatever it is. So, I was still gaining experience. And while I was there, and, I'd say to myself, well, sorry, I know about this. And I thought, oh, I want to go somewhere else, like the metallurgical laboratory. And I
Mm-hmm.
went to and I asked to be sent to the metallurgical laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
So I took my career into my own hands, and along with, well, they had to give me permission to move,
Mm-hmm. But you were proactive. It sounds to me you were very proactive in what you wanted to do and how you wanted to do it and how you were going to. And it sounds like you weren't afraid to ask, to say, well, I want to go and do this.
No, not to ask. They can
Yeah.
only say no. but you see, but for them to say no, they have to have a reason.
Yeah.
And I made sure that they didn't have a reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how I managed myself the whole through my career, all of my career.
So give us a flavour of some of the jobs that you had, and
Oh,
and also how because the idea of the show is about that sense of belonging in those different roles. What was it that helped you to gain your sense of belonging as a young black man now in the UK? What was it that kept you kind of like motivated and still in the UK, as it were?
well, I think, no, I'm thinking about it. Another thing, most Caribbeans who came to England, they want to go back in 5 years.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be here any longer than 5 years. So I had my plan in 5 years, but the 5 years grew into 57 years or whatever, however long it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, sorry, just repeat the question
No,
again.
so I was just saying, give us a
Yeah.
flavour of the different roles that you had and what it
Okay.
was that kept you or maintained your sense of belonging when you were going through those various roles.
Mm. As I said, I had an end view in mind, and the roles I started in you're talking about in engineering now. My
Yeah.
engineering, yeah, I started off, as I said before, as a production engineer in the project on the tools in
Mm-hmm.
production engineering. And even in the technical course I did, the technician's course I did, it was geared towards production engineering.
Mm-hmm.
But initially, I wanted to be a draftsman, design draftsman.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized that I needed to know about how things were made, the processes. And then when I decided to move, because I knew that you needed to know more about materials. So I went to the metallurgical laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there we did, we tested materials for structures, for their mechanical properties or the properties generally. And we did a lot of things, testing materials, general
Yeah.
like that. And in fact, I did end up in a design office, but not at the same company because they closed down.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
closed down. So I had to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And
Go on.
yeah, in moving on, I came to decide I wanted to. As a matter of fact, because they closed down at the time, there was a lot of unemployment and companies closing down. This is around the Ted Heath period,
Mm-hmm.
and moved to a number of organizations or companies for a very short period. But I still had my goal in mind and was to do design.
Yeah.
And I came to London on a course. I saw it. And when I left the company, the gentleman said, "I'm going to keep your job for you." I said, "I'm going to London on this course in design." And, I wasn't going to go back. But I went, did the design course, and stayed in London. As a matter of fact, they paid me to stay in London.
Wow.
The government paid me to stay in London because at the time, there's a shortage of vacancies in Manchester and up north anyhow. And they would, if you could find a job anywhere in the country, they would give you a subsidy for a period of time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I took advantage. As a matter of fact, I didn't know about it until I finished the course. And when I went back to, I got the job, and the lady said, "Oh, you are due a subsidy." And I can't remember how much it was, but it was a subsidy for a while.
Yeah.
Because we needed accommodation. The cost of everything was higher in London. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
subsidy. Although by then I was getting a London wage.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
then the transfer from from Manchester to London, there was some need for a
Yeah.
sort of a boost, if you
A
want to put it
boost,
that way.
yeah. The cost of living, even back then, there was a cost for living, So yeah. So in terms of then, because you've kind of highlighted that you wanted to do more of the design engineering as opposed to kind of like the technical stuff that you were doing before.
Yeah,
And you got this draft, you got the opportunity
design
to go on
draftsman.
to
Yeah,
the design draftman. What did that lead you into? And again, what was the environment like at the time?
it was quite enjoyable. I worked with London Underground. And by this time, I got my job with London Underground.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks London Underground is just the trains, the guards, station supervisor. But behind all that, it's a massive engineering organization. Massive. It's not just, no matter what discipline you are, you can go to London Underground and get a vacancy in your discipline.
Wow.
Basically. Yes, there's a massive support team at the back there.
Yeah.
And pardon me. And after a few years, honestly, I started thinking again, I needed to go elsewhere. I needed to move on because, I'm a draftsman, design draftsman. I did design a lot of things and, equipment. But it was beginning to, yes, I've done this. Let's move on. I asked for a transfer. And the underground ticketing system.
Yeah.
Yeah. I ended up as a commissioning engineer for the ticketing system, the gates, the ticket machines and all that. And I spent about a year and a half then there doing that. And you every move you make, you gain experience, but you need to make sure that it's relevant to where you want to go. But everything you do, it's experience you get, because then I didn't think about it at the time, but I was gaining management experience because each day we would install and commission a ticket office. Well, it's not each day. Sometimes it'll take 3 days a week or whatever. But I had to go in, and I was the liaison between the contractor and London Underground, and I had to manage things there. And then commission the equipment, ensure that it works, sign it off. So that was something very interesting. That's what one of the another arrow to my bow. My part. Because by then I decided I wanted to be in management.
Okay.
Yeah.
What gave you? What was it that led you to that decision to go down the management route?
Just gonna say again, it's me. I think I fulfilled what I wanted. I fulfilled. I got my goal of each time. No, I need to move on again. And management. In management, I think there was a wider scope.
Okay.
For me, I thought there was a wider scope, but during that time, I did a degree. And it was engineering design. But although it was engineering design, and I went into management, because what I did from then, as a matter of fact, I went into contracts management. And contracts management is just managing contracts. And the contracts vary from electrical, mechanical, closed circuit television, public address, lighting, electrical installations, electrical maintenance. It just went on. And there were a number of us, and each individual was given a package. You weren't just say you did electrical, you had to do CCTV, you used to do the maintenance on certain stations. So you'd have a group of stations, or say, for example, the Northern Line. And then how many stations on the Northern Line, you had to manage contracts there, and it could be air conditioning, it could be almost anything. So you had to manage that.
Wow.
And then you had to, you got involved in the procurement process, because each discipline or each contract, we had to do we had to have a contract drawn up. And we would put in the technical bits, and it would go out to tender, and then we would the procurement team would get the finance, and we would do the assessment of the technical bits. So it's quite interesting. But then in the end, a decision had to be made of who to give the contract to. So that was something I quite enjoyed, managing those contracts. It was very interesting. so varied, and you'd be managing different teams of people, different teams of different disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very interesting.
I'm just wondering then how did you transition? Because you said you did a degree in human management, not human
No,
management, design management,
engineering design.
design
Yeah.
engineering design. But you also then did was you also because your title is like a human factors, and how did that get into it? From
Okay.
going from the commissioning
Okay.
side to
Yeah.
like the human factors, where did the two marry up or come together?
Okay. What happened? It's a story. Um, from contracts management, I went to project engineering, and it's basically the same. What happened with the project engineer is most new projects, new works, and they were new build. And you have the different disciplines, you have the project manager, and you have the contractors. And what happened with the project manager will manage the financial bits on the communication, whatever, and the project engineer has to do the technical bits. And again, it could have different disciplines within that technical bit. So you were managing those bits. So
Mm-hmm.
there was also the design. As I said, I was building up experience going through from the shop floor, going
Mm-hmm.
through designs, the contracts management, maintenance, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. I was just gaining experience. And from then, and as a matter of fact, and they came to me and said, "Oh, you're going to have to do a master's degree." And I did the master's degree in engineering management. Right.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and that made me more flexible. So
Yeah.
I stayed in contracts in project engineering for quite a while. We're managing even up to refurbishment of trains.
Yeah.
I may not be a train engineer or whatever, but a railway engineer as such. But the experience that I gained over the years, that sort of culminated in being able to competency to carry out that work.
So
And
just to cut you there, what exactly did you have to do when we're talking about in human factors in engineering for refitting of a
okay,
train? What kind of things were you involved with doing?
okay, I let me just say this with in engineering design, a lot of human factors come into it.
Mm-hmm.
And although I had no intention of being there, because, for example, the simplest thing is we all used to design control desks.
Yeah.
Now, these control desks that they used had a lot of LEDs and the plans of on the tracks in on the panels,
Yeah.
and someone had to sit at the desk
Yeah.
comfortably. It had to be a certain height. He had to be able to reach everything within his control. And basically, you would need to, they're the primary tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to group the equipment but then we didn't go into that detail then. We didn't go into
Right.
that greater detail at that time. But going on the engineering management course now, so as I said, it just brought together everything, because we
Right.
had to do management, finance, and the way to the engineering degree, the master's degree, we did it through the Institute of Engineers.
Yeah.
So it all blended.
Wow. So I'm going to ask a kind of a side question, and this is kind of like going back to the very first point which you made, first point relating to engineering in the UK, was the fact that when you applied for your position, the man said, "I'm taking a chance on you. You're the first person like you."
Mm-hmm.
So you're a pioneer. Can you tell me about in all of these other environments that you then found yourself? Did you have anyone else who looked like you who were doing things the same as you, or were you kind of like the pioneer all the way through? How was it for you?
Almost all the way through. After taking me on, a number of Black people were taken on.
Right.
Right? And some of them weren't given apprenticeship positions, but they were trained, say like lathes, to work on a lathe or whatever machine it is. So then quite a number of people joined afterwards. When I was on say for example, when I did the degree, I did it with Open University because by then I had a home and I was married and I just didn't want to, I did it on the Open University. And on that course, most of the time I was the only one. On the technician course, I was the only one on it, on the Black person. On the first time I studied with someone Black like me was when I started doing the MSCs, and that a number of the individuals from the work went on that course, and there was a Black lady on the course with me, and she was the first I've been on the course with.
I'm just. There's another question which is kind of like stems from that, because one of the things which you had said was that at 17 the guy said to you, oh well, the education system in the Caribbean isn't as good as here. Okay. Do you ever have that sense that people, when you were going through, that their expectation wasn't as high for you or anything like that? Or did you feel, you know what, they've got my back, they want me to achieve exactly the same as all the other students? Or did it not matter?
There were a lot of people who didn't have your back. But, out there are a number of people who are nice people and who will help out. Yeah. And I had help in some instances. I know that. I couldn't have done it all on my own, although I was planning on doing it as much as I could on my own. But there were people who were in hindrances. But as I said before, if I want to get from A to B and there's an obstacle in my way, I'll go around, under, above, or through. And I had to do that a couple of times. I'll give you an example. A very nice boss. He was quite a nice guy. And he had me doing the minutes of the senior management meetings. No, this was in the design office. No, it was sort of oh dear, sorry about this. Yeah. I can't switch that off. Yeah.
Don't worry.
I don't know what's happening there. Yes. Yes, this gentleman he was a tough boss, but he had a heart. And I did the minutes for this meeting. And it was a privilege because a lot of people wanted to do it. And you get to know a lot of things, seriously, what the higher managers think and the way forward and the way they were going. And during that, I decided, look, I needed to move on. And I asked him if I could have a transfer. And he said no. Because, whatever reasons there were. I said, okay. And I gave it a little while and I asked again. And then the same answer. So I just went above him.
Yeah.
I went to his boss and I said, look, I'd like to move into another project, another vacancy. Is there anything going? He said, I'll get back in touch with you. And I didn't hear anything. I passed him a couple of times, nothing. And then one day he stopped and said, my boss rang and said, you're moving to King's Cross on Monday. You didn't tell me that you applied for this vacancy. I didn't. I just asked for a transfer. And that's when they had me commissioning the underground ticketing machines, because it was another project. It was a massive project, So, so during, you do have obstacles, but you do get people who help out a lot, I don't know if I question correctly.
No. No, that's fine. That's fine. It's kind of like what you've said there is just kind of highlighting the fact that actually, even if there are obstacles, it's what you did. It's basically the man kept saying to you no. And then someone once said to me, although when someone says no, think of it as not yet and develop your network. so that you can move around it. And that's what you effectively did, you know?
Yeah. Yes, I personally think, or sometimes it's just not what you're supposed to do. If
Yeah.
it's a disappointment, don't take it as a, okay, that's it. No.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there must be something else, another opportunity elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give up. If I
Yeah.
start something, I'm sorry, I don't stop. I have to complete.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if anyone else has any questions. I've got a couple more questions. But if anyone does have questions, then just raise your hand and I'll come to you, right? But just in terms of you've spoken about how it sounds to me that you had this internal drive, right? From when you got to the country, you had this internal drive as to this is where I would like to get to, and you've got there. And at each stage, you may have different obstacles, but as you said, you'll either go around it, you'll go over it, you'll go through it, but you're gonna get to where you wanted to get to. Um, I suppose my question is, it sounds a little, it's going to be a little bit not silly, but it's kind of like, where did you get that inner motivation from? Because so many people don't have that kind of mentality that to say, well, actually, if I get a blockage, right,
Mhm.
they can fall apart. But you didn't, it doesn't sound to me like that ever happened. To me, it sounds as though there was something. So where did that come from?
I have no idea. I have no idea. It's just who I am. It's just who I am. But I must, I must. It's just the people who are surrounded by, I would imagine. As I said to you before, I didn't have a need for role models because I grew up with them,
Yeah,
and they ended up in different, all being doing quite well,
yeah.
So I suppose I just took it as for granted, you need to move on. And I mentioned something when I passed one of my exams.
Mhm.
And I mentioned to my uncle, I said, "Oh, I passed." He says, "It's just no." He was expecting it because everybody else has done it. So if you hadn't, you'll be different from them.
Yeah,
It's like you probably would be a failure.
yeah. So, you know what? I think it goes back to something you said right at the start when you spoke about the grammar school that you went to, the oldest grammar school in the
Okay.
Caribbean. Yeah. And you
Yeah.
said that they had set this standard. Yeah. And they were expecting um, they were expect there was this inner expectation that they gave you and your
Yeah.
family gave you that same sense
Same
of
vibe. Yep.
yeah that
Yeah.
this is who you are, right?
Yeah.
Don't let it, circumstances don't change who you are.
I believe that. And if you're going into a new environment, you need to be true to yourself because I think it would be very difficult to take on another sort of character because you
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be true to form and
Mm-hmm.
you would more than likely not be successful.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if there's something I think it may look good, but I don't think I can do it, I will have no aspirations to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So I would stay away from it. But
yeah,
I would be going in a different. So I go on along a path that I have interest in, and and I plan my options of getting to where I need to go.
yeah, yeah. Pragmatic. It's almost kind of like a pragmatic approach, a structured pragmatic approach to how you're going to achieve the things that you want to, and
Uh,
practical in the way that you've gone about it.
I'm going to say something about you asked me how I got to be a human factors engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't quite get to answer that question, but I went to, during my training, I got to King's Cross as
Mm-hmm.
what the assistant design manager. And we managed different areas of the project. There are about four of us and an assist and each one an assistant. And you did get your own little project to
Mm-hmm.
manage. Although if your boss is away on holidays, you manage the whole thing.
Yeah.
And from there, one day, my Friday evening, my boss said to me, George, by Monday morning, you need to know a lot about human factors. And at the time, I didn't know anything about human factors. I knew about ergonomics.
Yeah.
And ergonomics has got to do with anthropometrics, man measurements, etc. And he said, and I thought, oh heavens above. And I got home, went on the internet, and there were 2 million hits. What do I do? So I chose an American standard and I read through it. It didn't tell me much, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. And when I got there, said, go see someone. No, he said, try and find someone who does human factors in the underground. No one did. So they were bringing in contractors to do human factors. And I went over to the individual, had a little get together with, chatted about it. And I had to manage human factors. Now, the guys I were managing, I was called then given the title, Human Factors Delivery Manager. Mm-hmm. And not just for my little area, but for the whole project.
Wow.
But the thing is, I wasn't doing the work. I was delivering it with the help of the contractors.
Right.
But of course, there was a problem there because he said, look, I'm the human factors engineer here. I said, yes, but you are just working for me. Basically, I mean, these guys were earning £800 a day, So that was years ago. I'm talking about 12 years ago, probably more than that. And there was a problem there. But in the end, we worked it out, and everything they did had to come through me. And then again, if you think about it, all that managerial experiences that I had over the years, that was then coming into play then.
Yeah.
When my work design bit of the work was done, I went back to, I was subcontracted out to the conference, to the project by the company. Normally on a project, you sit there and they, and when the project, you go back into the main company. And when I got back there, they said, oh, we don't have any human factors engineers here. And I thought, And at the time, I decided I was going to stay in project engineering. And then they said, look, you need to go to the university and do another master's degree. And I'll be honest with you, it was the last thing I wanted to do, because doing a master's degree with a family around is not easy. And it went on for about 6 to 7 months. And it was actually, my hand was all the way back behind my back. You had to go to university. And I in the end, I went to the university, Loughborough University, and did the master's degree. And to me, it may seem, a lot of people didn't like it. Seriously, a lot of the staff didn't like it. There was an individual given an opportunity to go and do a master's, and both my master's degrees were paid for by my company because they wanted me to do it. Yeah. And it was it took 2.5 years part-time, and it was the most enjoyable time study I've ever had. And I think that, I see that as a plus, as them helping me to be where I ended up. Yeah. You see? So I did get help to achieve my goals. Yeah.
Yeah. Time is against us, right? So it's just so fascinating, all the stuff that you've said and how it almost like ties round, it almost comes full circle in the way in which things have happened.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask just like two questions, right? I'm going to ask the first question. I always ask this question, which is, what advice would you have given, looking back now, what advice would you have given to your 16-year-old self? Okay.
Okay. I'm going to put it to the very first thing I think everyone should know or should accept. Be honest. Be honest. I've been in situations where people have offered bribes, where I like my job. So be honest. Know your job. And if somebody is a 16-year-old, you need to do some research. See what this discipline he prefers, a preferred discipline. It's very difficult because I think a 16-year-old could find it very difficult nowadays to decide where they want to end up. And when you think you know what you want, find potential employers. Learn about the company and their work. And I'm going to give you an example. I've got a friend who's very senior manager in one of the biggest companies in the UK. We were children in Jamaica, not in the UK, in the world. And he said to me, he used to travel a lot. And he applied to Hitachi. And he read everything that they put about. He said they had a book, a Bible of what they did. Got a job and he applied for the vacancy. There was a vacancy. And he said, during the interview, the fellow got up and said, excuse me, I need to do something next door. And my friend learned many, many years later that interviewer rang someone else who was a friend of his and asked him, is this guy for real? He probably knows more about the company that I do. Of course, he got the job, right? And when you know where you want to go, it's a matter of continuous professional development. No, I think you need to develop yourself, and you need to develop, your character, your personality, whatever. You need to develop yourself, and you need to, gain competence in your discipline. Be result focused. I think it's very important. Organize. And one friend of mine, I was doing some things, and I said, "Your time management is bad." No, I don't agree with you. I didn't agree with him, but I decided I'm going on a time management course. Now, at work, you could choose what course you went on. Each for professional development. And I did go on a time management course. And I found it very useful in contracts management because I had probably about 10 contracts managing at the same time. And it was difficult managing time that way, but my time management improved drastically. So that, plan your way forward. I jotted a few things down there. Plan your way forward. That will help you in the management of change. And why I put it that way is that if you plan your way, you know where you want to go. And there may be obstacles, right? So what you have to do is to make sure that you've got the ability to change, but not to give up. I don't know if that's making sense.
Yeah,
it's making sense to me the way I think. But that's one. Plan your options. Same thing. What if scenarios? Things like that. Are you really interested in the discipline or your choice? Are you really, really interested? And another thing is your educational qualification suitable?
Yeah.
Because you could have done, in school we used to call it divinity, history, music, and you wanted to be an engineer. That was a big change. So that's something, I think you should do. When you in your position, when you're there to get on, you got to plan to do extra work outside the office. For example, at King's Cross, we had to use so many different British standards. You won't have the time at work to do that. So you need to take home bedtime reading. I mean, that's what I did. On the train, I met up with one of my colleagues. What was he reading? The same thing I was reading. He's reading the standard, British Standard, and whatever it is. Because when you go to speak to a discipline engineer, he expects you to have a good knowledge of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You may not be the discipline engineer, but as an engineer and design manager, you have to have some idea what he's talking about. Yeah. And you need to know about the relevant standard. That applies. And another thing that I find important, and I think my son has grabbed that off me, volunteer for positions. He came to me the other day and said, there's a position at work and I'm going to apply for it. I'm going to volunteer, because I want this. It's more in management. He's going to move on IT to management of IT. And when they said, okay, I accepted it. Then he said to me a couple of days later, I didn't know it came with an increase in pay.
Yeah.
There are benefits. And we spent some time in Abu Dhabi, and the similar thing happened. There was a management position in his team, and people didn't want it because they too much work and whatever. He said, okay, I'll have it. I'll go. He took it. And it was beneficial because it improved his employment.
The skill set.
Yeah. It improved it because doing that, he came back to England and also what he was doing this continuous professional development. So when he came back to the UK, he could go straight into a job. Now, none of the individuals who were there with him can't find a job. But he came back to the UK and went to one of the biggest management companies, financial management organization, and he's moving along. So, So, if you're with some department or something, you see there's a pathway, and along that pathway, there's a department that gives you skills that you could use in the end.
Then utilize it.
If possible,
Right.
They won't reduce your pay.
No, they shouldn't do.
They shouldn't, and you gain that experience, even for 3 months or whatever, this experience towards your final goal.
Fantastic. Uncle Paul, we're out of time. We're out of time, right?
Okay, yes.
We're out of time in terms of the recording, but it's been absolutely brilliant having this discussion, and I know we're going to have many more. But the insight that you gave and the advice that you were giving to the young people, right? And not just to young people, because as you were saying it, I was thinking you're 100% right. Continual professional development, working, being honest in the workplace, being honest wherever you are is very important. Be
employable.
Be employable. Yeah. All of those factors are immensely important. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just let people know what's happening next week. And if anyone wants to stay on for 5 or 10 minutes afterwards so we can have a discussion, we can do. So let me just share with everyone. But a big thank you for being our guest today on Belonging.
You're most welcomed.
Right. So next week, we're going to have a young lady, a fantastic young lady, Faith Uwade, and she is a research and culture and community specialist at the Wellcome Trust, and she's a co-founder of the Black Women on Wheels, and she's also an alumni of Imperial College. So she's going to be our guest next week. If you haven't seen some of the other interviews, then please go to our YouTube channel, which is tinyurl.com/belonging-IAO, and you'll be able to see many of the previous interviewed guests that we have. they're our first 100. We're almost approaching our third birthday, but we've done over 100 guests now. So if you want to have a look at a few of them, then please feel free to do so. But as I've said, these are just the first 100, but we've got so many more stories. And it's only because people are willing to share their experiences and share their what it is that has helped them to gain their sense of belonging, that we are able to be enriched and get a better insight into what makes us who we are. So until next week, I want to just say another big thank you. If you want to stay on after the recording, then please feel free to do so. But thank you again for all being here this afternoon.